So you had been teaching, you had been meeting all these incredible people, these luminaries that you had looked up to and who were really driving, so many of the changes in American food culture, certainly at that time, and, and their legacy is with us today and in all the ways we look at food now. But I want to talk to you about the act of writing, and in particular, the act of writing The Splendid Table. Which, I guess maybe not everyone knows this, but the show, The Splendid Table, got its name from Lynne's first book, which was called The Splendid Table. I can't believe I'm even saying that. Like, they can probably figure that out. But Lynne, so before the show was even a glimmer in anyone's eye, Lynne was writing this book. It is a magnificent book. The copy's outside for sale. It's like a phone book kind of book, and it is an exhaustive and totally passionate exploration of the traditions of Emilia-Romagna. Yeah. Which it's not, I don't think it's fair to even say, oh, it's a regional cookbook. It is truly an exploration of a place. Mm-hmm. And the act of writing that book, which you said took you over 10 years, changed you.
Tremendously. There's someone sitting in the audience who did much of the research with me, my dear friend Cara da Silva. And we traveled together there. Cara's quite a journalist on her own right. Has written about food and food history for years and many other areas of scholarship. But I was living in Brussels, and I was 11 hours and 59 minutes, I guess, from downtown Parma, which is one of the major cities in Emilia-Romagna. It's a region that sits between Tuscany and the Veneto, okay? It's one of the wealthiest regions. It's the only place in Italy where Parmigiano Reggiano can be made, where the true balsamic vinegar can be made, and where Parma ham can be made. It's, what would you call terroir, subclimates, whatever you want to call it, and the traditions are amazing, these three incredible foods. But the reality was that I originally never thought of writing a book. I just kept going back because I kept learning so much. And what would happen is that, for instance, I didn't know anything about balsamic vinegar. At that time you could buy Fini balsamic vinegar, which was very nice. But when I wanted to learn more about it, and I had taken a class with Marcella Hazan years before, that was the region where we were. Mm-hmm. And I knew a little bit about the fact that there was another kind of balsamico, and then talking to people in my Italian, I studied Italian pretty assiduously because I spoke a very backward form of it from the family. And not my family didn't, I did. But anyway,
because you wanted to be Chinese.
Well, that's right, exactly. But I discovered people would send you to people. In Italy and a lot of other places, I think you probably know this as well, when people think you're serious about something and they know you're very curious and you've expressed interest in something, they will pass you on. Sure. It's like saying, she's okay. And I ended up learning about the balsamic vinegar that for hundreds of years would be presented as a gift to an honored guest. A small barrel of it would be the dowry of a bride going to her family within that region, that there were balsamics that were hundreds of years old because of the system. The system is a system of a row of barrels from smaller to larger, and that what happens is, and the barrels have holes in the top, so it's an evaporation process, and they're up in the attic, and the windows are open and whatever. And what would happen is that as you took from this littlest barrel, which would be the oldest vinegar, you never took it all. A third was, or half was always left. And then you refilled that from the next barrel, and the next barrel, and the next barrel. So the reality is that the vinegar you're taking from that little barrel every year, perhaps, parts of it go back to your great-great-great-great-grandmother, and a part of it may be from the harvest of last year. So look, I've written chapters about this. I'm not going to go into it. But I ended up in attics. This was before anybody knew this stuff or knew it existed. I had friends who lived 100 miles north. They prided themselves, they had a gourmet club. And when I mentioned to them that I was going down to Modena, which is the heartland of this, and I was going to spend some time with a balsamico, families did this, factories didn't do it. They said, what are you talking about? I said, balsamic vinegar. They had no, this was back in the early 80s. They had no idea what I was talking about. Well, this is like, I can't explain, it's a siren song. You kept going back again and again, learning how you cure a ham with only salt, no nitrates. And how do you keep that ham from spoiling when you're hanging it for 2 years? What's the science? And what had started me with that was years before, living in New York, and collecting country hams. Because I had started to read the Foxfire series, and I'm not going to go into it, but look it up. This is some of the most valuable piece of Americana that we have in terms of what is food about in this country, what are people about. And this is about Appalachia, and it was talking about curing hams. And not the hams we get in the grocery store. These were hams that took years of cure, and you slice them paper thin, and you even cook them. Anyway, everywhere my husband went, he traveled a lot in those days, he would bring home a ham. And I kept a ham diary. And we had I don't think there's anything odd about that,
Yeah, fabulous.
And so here I was in
baseball
Italy.
Cards when I was a kid.
What?
I collected baseball cards when I was a kid.
I don't know why you didn't get on hams. I mean, good Lord.
I should have.
So at any rate, here I was in this world of extraordinary foods and people who lived the past. Also, not just the past, not the romance of it, the realities of it.
Right.
Like you quickly learn what that glorious peasant food that I used to write about in Bon Appetit and, all of that. Well, the real food of the peasants wasn't all that romantic often. It wasn't, usually people who worked in the field saw a piece of meat at Christmas and Easter, and it was from the cow that died, and we didn't want to know why. And, when you look at ravioli and tortellini, this is Sunday food, but what else would you do when you have a pound of meat and 12 people to feed?
Sure.
You stuff a pasta, and it becomes delicious. So I was fascinated, and we were then told we were going back to the United States a year early. And I was standing in the shower, behaving in a very mature way. I was going to chain myself to the balcony. I had no desire to leave. I was just getting rolling. And the other thing is, I was going to write a book, and I didn't know what it was going to be. I had to pay tribute to the fact that I had been dropped into this world of the past, of the present, of extraordinary people doing extraordinary things and doing them in their backyard, doing them, these were artisans before that ever became fashionable.
Sure.
And the love of the quality, not because they were esoteric and everybody was a gourmet, but because it was part of who they were. Of course you're going to make a good cheese. It's my family. You think we'd ever make a bad cheese? It's that kind of thing. So the reality was that in the midst of that sobbing and whatever, I thought, I'm going to write a book about Emilia-Romagna. Nobody's done this book about all the history of it, how it came about, why this food in this place that's different from the food over the mountains and across the river, which is true in every place in the world. Anyway, and it was about 1.5 years before we were going to leave, and I started. I looked at all the notebooks. I used to photograph. I used to do something like 500 photographs a trip. And the great thing was I had a car. My husband was very understanding. And I could disappear for 4 weeks. I had no return plane ticket. I could drive. If somebody, as things happened, you were going to go home on Tuesday, and then I'd call my husband. He'd say, I know. And he'd maybe see me on Saturday, and then maybe not, because what had happened was, and,
Because Jacques was there. And
well, yes. I have to
hope
say.
you brought him some hams.
Yeah. I do have to say, there were some stud muffins along the way that were not bad. But
This is our wedding night.
So that was the beginning of the Splendid Table. And the original idea was I wanted to talk about why certain things happen in a place. Why this food in this place. And I thought I'd start with Christ and move up. No, because
Okay, can I tell you, I actually work as an editor at a publishing house. Like, if I got a proposal for a cookbook and said, I want to start with Christ and work my way up.
I did adopt a little bit because I had a come to Jesus moment. Because I couldn't justify the research. I couldn't do enough. But what had led to that was that this area includes the Po River Delta. Consider that to be the Mississippi of Italy, a very important area for trade, et cetera. And it turns out that there were Etruscans trading at that delta before Christ. And there's still evidence of the community. And what they were trading was fascinating to me. And there were historians, I mean, in Italy, I can't tell you how many professors there are that really focus on culinary history. There's clubs of men who are fascinated, and all of them find old volumes, and they get together once a week, and they tell each other about them. I mean, it's just amazing. And one of those clubs was called the Capacchi Club in Parma. Capacchi was wonderful. Anyway, I was allowed to sit in, this American with mediocre Italian. I mean, the privilege you have. So the reality was, I decided I was going to write the 500 years in Emilia-Romagna, because the Renaissance was a really important thing there, and that was really the beginning of modern food. And this is where the awareness, all the interest I had had in history and whatever, I learned something. Never trust what you read until you've checked it out. There's so many wonderful stories, and they're not true. And people, I understand, people are on deadlines and whatever, but you need time. You have to really know what you're talking about. And by the way, I spent 10 years researching. I could go back and do another 10. Oy vey.